Hasan, what's the implications if we do see these snapback sanctions actually coming into effect should no nuclear deal be reached by the end of August?
Yeah, I think it would obviously, I think, be extremely troubling for Iran to see the return of snapback sanctions. And I think the Iranians have been very clear that this would very much, I think, further jeopardize their commitment to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And I think would probably make it very difficult from the Iranian perspective for them to be able to, I think, work more constructively with the International Atomic Energy Agency, which they've already actually have said that they're paring back cooperation with. So I think the Iranians would obviously react quite negatively to this. But I think if we do see a reimposition of snapback sanctions, then I think that would probably reflect a European view that in reality, I think we will have reached almost a dead end with Iran, seeing that Iran will not really have, I think, made any significant progress by way of reaching a satisfactory nuclear deal. I think the broader implications of this in terms of what this means for the possibility of a return to US or Israeli strikes would probably be more worrying. We've recently seen reporting that nuances, US assessments of how much damage Iran's nuclear program has sustained because of US strikes. And I think the option of a return to Israeli or American attacks against Iranian nuclear facilities is still on the table. So I think if we do see a resumption of snapback sanctions, I think that would be a troubling signal that a return to hostilities and to regional instability could very much be on the horizon.
Hasan, you're someone who thinks about this deeply, as do I. The question has been raised, given the fact that new US intelligence suggests that the current US strikes we saw during this 12-day conflict between Israel and Iran on those Iranian nuclear facilities only had a limited impact on those facilities, not obliterated as President Trump suggests, but a limited impact on those facilities, might raise the prospect of additional Israeli action inside Iran. To what probability do you subscribe that to actually happen at this point?
I think I always take these assessments with a grain of salt because the devil is always in the details. So the question of whether Iran's nuclear facilities have been obliterated, I think, is really difficult for anyone to know with much certainty because a lot of this is underground. And the ability of the US or Israel to verify the extent of damage is rather questionable. So I think a lot of this is hypothetical at this stage. And then the question is, well, even if the facilities weren't fully obliterated, but a lot of it essentially is inaccessible because it has all been, or much of it has been buried underground, then, you know, does it in reality achieve the same effect? So I think we have to be very wary of these assessments, especially when time frames are concerned. You know, whether the Iranians are able to rebuild in 3 months or 6 months or 2 years. There are a number of assumptions, including how much resources the Iranians throw at this, which we don't really know. So I think what we do know, however, is that the Israelis and the Americans, I think, have sent a credible signal that they are able and willing to conduct military action if they sense that Iran is intent on rebuilding and reconstituting elements of its nuclear program. The Iranians, I think, are still quite intent on doing so. They have suggested very clearly that they have not given up on their nuclear ambitions. They are still ultimately capable because they have the know-how, they have the human resources, they have the knowledge, and they have much of some of those facilities are potentially still intact. And so I think the elements of further conflict, of further instability are still very much present. And so I wouldn't discount the possibility of a return to hostilities at all.
Hasan, let's switch focus over to US Gulf investment ties, certainly deepening this week with Bahraini officials on the ground in Washington, D.C., and also announcing this major investment as well, some 17 billion USD on the table. I want your take on this too, because of course President Trump skipped Bahrain during his most recent Gulf visit in May. What do you think is driving Bahrain's strategic push to deepen ties with the United States right now, and how significant is this $17 billion investment, both politically and economically?
So I think the $17 billion package and the trip by Bahrain's Crown Prince and Prime Minister, I think, is an important milestone in the U.S.-Bahrain relationship. The optics of this visit have been excellent from the U.S. and Bahraini standpoint. The Crown Prince and Prime Minister was received very warmly by the President, by the Vice President, and by the Defense Minister. So really a robust schedule of engagement. I think the $17 billion are obviously welcome from the U.S. perspective. They include deals to invest in U.S. LNG and U.S. aluminium, which I think aligns quite closely with President Trump's own economic agenda of attracting investments into U.S. manufacturing. And they also include deals with Oracle and Cisco on telecoms, which I think from the standpoint of competing with China, I think works well for the United States, and then obviously deals with Boeing and GE. So I think one of the other, I think, important developments from this trip has been the signing of a civil nuclear pact, which I think goes back to the discussion around Iran and the question of nuclear security in the region. Because I think we can fairly speculate, without really having seen the text of this agreement, that it will not include provisions for the domestic enrichment of uranium. I think it was quite obvious that Secretary Rubio took the opportunity of the signing ceremony around this deal to send a thinly veiled message to Iran that the U.S. is willing to work with any party to further cooperation in the civil nuclear field, so long as the intent is purely peaceful. And I think that was obviously a message that was intended for Iran. So I think this is an important milestone in the U.S.-Bahrain relationship, and I think it essentially coheres with the robust engagement that we've seen from the Trump administration towards the Gulf states, and that has been, I think, very well reciprocated by countries in the region as well.